If you've never knit a sweater, stop the video and just go start this one. Why is my Miles shirt jacket not ready to wear yet? My first design is officially underway and I'm here to share the humble beginnings of it today, and I'm very excited about it. I could cry.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast today. Happy October, happy spooky season, happy fall, happy sweater weather. I'm feeling pretty good about sitting down and finally having a chance to talk to you today, especially because I am finally in a sweater, and that just feels really good. If you're new here, like I said, I'm Nora. I'm coming to you from a small farm here in Connecticut where we finally have our first proper fall day. It's gonna warm up again after this, but I'm running with it, as you can tell. And I have been making these knitting videos here on YouTube for 2 years now, after starting to knit about 2.5 years ago. And I've just always been really passionate about sharing the fact that knitting can be whatever you want it to be. I'm here to encourage you to try doing the hard things, to hopefully eliminate some fear around said hard things, and just to let you know that I believe you can knit whatever the heck you want to, and especially if you consider the fact that the imperfections are what makes something so perfectly handmade. So if that all feels like something you can get on board with, then I suggest you come hang out with us more often. I'm here for you on Saturdays at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So with all that out of the way, I feel like I'm either going to be here for 20 minutes or 2 hours today because so much has happened, yet so little. So we're going to debrief today and just lay out what all I've been working on. That's going to include a couple of whip updates, a brand new finished object that was also a new cast on since last time we spoke, some things that haven't gotten done, projects I worked on that I hadn't in a little bit, and then the most exciting part, my first design is officially underway and I'm here to share the humble beginnings of it today, and I'm very excited about it. I could cry. But first, let's talk about what I'm wearing super quickly. I was in the mood to just do something kind of funky today. Run with it with me. I am wearing my fall staple, which is my stripe hype sweater by Veronica Lindbergh. Mine is knit out of the base color. The gray that you see is Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool. I would say is maybe one of my favorite yarns I've ever worked with, and it's so budget friendly. So I can highly, highly recommend that. And then the different colors that you see are an assortment of, it was a nature spun wool that I had thrifted and I held that double, and then the dark gray that you see in the front was some leftover Cascade 220 superwash from my dad's zipper sweater. I love, love, love this garment. If you've never knit a stripe hype, if you've never knit a sweater, stop the video and just go start this one. I think you need a stripe hype in your life. I think it's an amazing stash buster. The gauge is so approachable. It's a worsted weight, just a little bit chunkier type sweater. It's so simple. There's no German short rows, and yet it fits like a dream. It's just hit the ground running type knitting. You cast on the back, you start working a rectangle, you pick up for the front, you start working down. Before you know it, you're in the round and you're just working those rounds. And with every stripe, it goes so fast. You come pick up the stitches for the sleeves and this drop shoulder construction, and then everything's finished off with this gorgeous twisted rib. I modified mine just in the littlest way by doing a split hem instead of a round hem, and that's just kind of how I prefer a more basic sweater so it doesn't cinch in on the bottom. Couldn't love this thing more. I definitely want another in my life. We'll see if we get to it by the end of the year. So with that out of the way, why don't we go ahead and dive on in. I'm literally like looking around. Where do I start? Let's start with okay, can we throw out any preconceived notion you have of the format of a knitting podcast video? We're going to lose that today because I need to find a flow that's going to work. So I'm going to start with an acquisition because it's going to lead into a finished object. And there's going to be a little life sprinkled in here because I have lived, I think, 10,000 lives since I filmed my last podcast. I was working in Vermont actually over the past weekend, and on my way home I was able to drop into Webb's, that's America's yarn store, yarn.com. If you're unfamiliar, it's just a really big yarn shop, and I just always like to drop by when I'm in the area, which is rare, specifically to go check out the back warehouse where they have like all of their major deals, and I love to find yarns back there. So the find that I had this time around was this little lot of yarn. I actually bought 4 balls of this. I just had the 3 handy here. So this is Jojo Land Harmony. It's 100% merino wool, and it is a lace weight merino wool. So actually each of these balls is 50 grams to 880 yards. So much yarn on each of these balls. And is there a colorway? It says that the color is HC04. I don't know if that'll mean anything to anyone, but basically, if you cannot tell, they're the most stunning pastel, just fun rainbowy colors there ever were. It's so beautifully sherbirdy and kind of like holographic looking, and I saw this and immediately thought, first of all, I wanted something for myself, but if nothing else, I really thought it would be the perfect yarn for a little baby girl, which my sister is going to be having in early next year. So I had to do it, and especially because these yarns were basically 50% off. They were 45.05% off. And so for the 4 of them, it should have been about $40, and instead I spent $21.96. So $22 for 4 balls of yarn, and I got home and just like had to cast on, which is where our finished object comes into play. And that is this little sweater dress that I have knit up for my brand new baby niece who is on the way. And I could not be more thrilled with how this turned out. So this was a little bit of it's a very modified version of another sweater. So I'll get to that in a second. But first, you might be able to tell that the color on this is super subtle. And that's because I held a strand of that lace weight yarn, the color changing yarn, with a strand of my all-time favorite, the K&C Essential Cotton, and this is the white colorway. It's called Cream, so it's a little bit off-white. I bought a ton of this color specifically in the Joann's closing sales. Also, it was just brought to my attention that you can now find K&C yarns on a random website that I'd never heard of, but I will do my best to remember to link that in the description because it's my favorite cotton, and I've been living in my cotton sweaters. I'll be making more next year. So I thought it would be really fun to hold a strand of that lace weight with a strand of this borderline worsted weight yarn and see if I could almost create a like sad baby beige version of rainbow pastel. And I nailed it. There's no question about it. It's the prettiest little fade from a mint green into my favorite part, which is like the pink belly of it. And then it fades out into more of a yellow color. And then the only thing is I did knit this in a raglan construction. So my sleeves kind of went a little bit awry, and they're honestly just like almost gray looking. But because everything else is so subtle, I didn't think it really mattered. Also, this is for a baby. So I'm just loving the color story that panned out here. So let me tell you now a little bit more about what I've actually knit up. So to knit this, I referenced the free drops pattern called Dream in Blue, and it's actually meant to be knit up on more of a DK weight yarn, and then the raglan details of that sweater just have this kind of like knit purl sort of rib interesting thing going on, and then all of the finishes are just little ribbing bits. So I referenced the smallest size of that pattern, knowing that my gauge was going to be quite a bit bigger, and also understanding that this will just fit little baby girl whenever it fits her. I didn't particularly care when it was going to work for the baby. I just wanted to knit something in this color. So I referenced the smallest size literally just for the cast on numbers. And then I did start knitting according to the pattern. But with this cotton yarn, the spans of ribbing that made up the raglan increase, it just looked really sloppy in the cotton. So I ripped back and I figured, let me make this just as easy as I possibly can. So for me, that meant I was going to do my raglan increases using yarn overs so that at no point would I have to stop whatever I was doing and look at my work and insert the needle into a particular stitch to create a, make one right or make one left. Instead, I could just add the yarn over and on the next round, resolve it by knitting that stitch. That was going to make this the most simple for me. So that was what I went ahead and did. When I finished that increasing, I simply joined in the round and started knitting down. Now, at that point, I did measure my gauge and I figured out that the size sweater I was kind of making based on that gauge was more in line with the 6 to 9 month size of the sweater. So from that point on, I started following the schematic for the 6 to 9 month sweater, meaning that the length of this, I knit to the length that a 6 to 9 month sweater should be. So I was able to use my gauge and the stitch counts of the newborn size to deduce that the length of things should be according to about a 6 to 9 month sweater. So now I know that this should be about a 6 to 9 month size for my niece. Now, I also just have heard so many people discuss baby knits. And one of the common themes I had heard as far as just getting the most wear out of your baby knits is that babies tend to grow lengthwise before they grow widthwise. And so you could maybe buy a little extra time by making things just a little longer. And I think this pans out especially for a little girl. I made this to be almost more just like a baby tunic length, something that would maybe cover her bum and she could just wear a pair of like leggings or something underneath it. And then I also knit the sleeves just a little bit longer than the schematic for that 6 to 9 months set in the pattern so that we could probably just roll the sleeves back and she could get some wear out of it as a baby. But then as she gets taller, those sleeves could come undone. The length would be a little shorter and then it would be more of a shirt on her. Maybe it won't work. I don't know yet. But with those things in mind, the other modifications that I had made was my favorite one was to the hem. So I knit down to the point before the ribbing and then I worked every stitch in that round as a knit front back, which doubled the amount of stitches on my needles, which was a little overwhelming. But I was then able to work a twisted rib at the bottom that creates this little kind of peplum fun edge. And I knit that for about 1.5 inches and finished it off with an I-cord edge. So the rest of this sweater, I think I knit on a 5mm needle. When I got down to the twisted rib, I knit that on a 4mm needle. And then I went back to a 5mm needle to do the I-cord edge to make sure that when I do block this, which I haven't yet, I can kind of stretch the bottom of it out to really get that fun kind of dress hem, and that just made it a little girly touch for me. After that, I had gone back and I picked up actually for the collar because I did not cast on the collar originally. I just don't like my cast on edge so much, so I avoid that when I can. And I knit about half of the length that I had on the hem in the ribbing up, and then I did the setup rounds for an Italian tubular sewn bind off and really tried to keep that quite loose so that I could stretch this out, because that was my one concern knitting a pull over, especially in a cotton, was ability to get this over baby's head. So we'll also see how that works out. If I have to modify things, I'll do that later. That's fine with me. And then I just went and I had those raglan stitches sitting on a stitch holder and picked those up. I worked apparently 4 rounds of decreases and then just knit straight down and worked the same I-cord edge at the end as I had on the end of the hem. I just think that it's the most darling thing. It's so pretty when you kind of do hold it to the light. You start to see the rainbow coming through a little bit more, just depending on kind of which way you look at it. It's just a very fun and interesting fabric, and I think it's so perfectly suited to a little girl. So that's gonna be for my sister. I just have to wash and block it. So I'll spare you the details of this one for today, and maybe for forever. I'll probably throw it on my sheet, but this was just such a whirlwind project. It literally, from cast on to bind off, took me 2 full days, and it was 2 full days of knitting. Like, it's been a wild couple of weeks since I did the last podcast, so I was due for just some relaxation time, and this was the perfect form to get that in. So yeah, this is based off of that Dream in Blue pattern, but it's basically the cast on numbers for that, and then the schematic and everything else was just kind of me freestyling. But I love her anyway. So that is the finished object and cast on and acquisition of the week. Moving on, I would love to chat with you a little bit more about my darling cardigan by Veronica Lindbergh, which I have been knitting out of another KNC yarn. It's the Cloud Paca in their cotton candy bubblegum colorway. Cotton candy, bubblegum, never remember. Which is a blown yarn. It's a nylon tube blown with baby alpaca fibers. And I finished this cardigan. It was completely blocked and everything. And then in the last podcast, I started taking it apart again. And I just had a few interesting insights. And I wanted to show you kind of where I've landed since that podcast. So let me get her onto the hanger for you. Here we have where we're at with the darling cardigan. So some interesting things had happened. I finished the cardigan, like I said, and I regretted kind of quickly that I hadn't blocked it before knitting the double knit button band. So in last podcast, I cut out the button band in a very dramatic fashion and started just ripping this thing out. Now, at that point, I realized that I hadn't actually yet filmed the after blocking footage of this cardigan. So I kind of stopped halfway and I filmed it then and there. And I really wish now that I had some footage of it fully blocked, because something so interesting happened. When I looked back at those after blocking clips with half a button band, I was looking at it thinking that is the perfect length. Why am I ripping this project out? But then I realized that the side that still had the double knit button band on it was quite a bit shorter. And so what I realized is that my gauge in the double knit button band was just that much more snug, that even though I picked up every stitch along the front of the cardigan, there was still a discrepancy between the row gauge in the button band versus the fabric of the rest of the sweater. So I felt a little bit relieved in that even if I had blocked the cardigan prior to knitting the double knit button band, I don't think I would have made any changes because it looked right to me. And so I probably still would have encountered the same problem. With that in mind, hindsight is 2020. I've ultimately decided that I just knit the body a little bit longer than I actually want it to be when it's all said and done, so that now that I know the button band is going to draw the length up a little bit, or maybe not even draw it up, it's going to restrict how much the length can drop. Now that I know that that's going to happen, I'm anticipating it and just overshooting the length that I want on this cardigan by a little bit. So I wound up cutting out and ripping out the whole button band. As a matter of fact, it's sitting next to me here. So this is the button band in question. And then I also just went ahead and cut out the ribbing at the bottom. This blown yarn is so finicky to rip out, this was just the easiest way to do it. And I knew I had enough yarn that the goal is to not have to use this yarn at all, because blown yarn that's been blocked and ripped out, it's just not fun to work with. So I ripped that out. I got my stitches back on the needles. I went ahead and knit back to, I kind of ripped back too far. So then I went and I knit back to kind of where I wanted to land. And then I decided I would add just a few German short rows so that the back of the cardigan would lay a little bit longer, because this is one of those things I do want it to be cropped. But I did find in those before and after blocking shots that the back was just a little bit too short. And it's just one of those things that happens for me. I think some people have mentioned that this has to do probably with bust measurements versus length and increases and accommodations made for that. So a lot of these just oversized boxy cardigans, if you're not accommodating for a bust measurement, it's possible that fabric will pull from other places to make up for that kind of lost space. So I worked probably, I wish I had maybe written it down. I kind of put a marker at the center point under each arm, and I worked some German short rows across the whole back and just starting to come into the front of the cardigan. Let's say maybe 6 rows in total, just to help kind of drop the back of this a little bit when I'm wearing it. And I think that worked. From there, I went and I knit a little extra stockinette, more than I had before. And now I'm just back to knitting the 2x1 rib that makes up the hem. And as compared to the sleeve cuff here, because I'm knitting them both to the same length, you could see I'm like just rows away from being done with that. And then getting back to doing another Rook bind off on this one. So once that's done, I'm going to be reknitting the button band, which I've said before, I'm actually very happy to do because I know the buttons I want to use for this, and I kind of just did not anticipate how narrow the button band was going to be. So I intend to maybe even double the width of this button band. I also just like a little chunkier of a button band in most applications. So that's the plan. I'm not mad about doing it. I simply haven't had a ton of time to focus on this since the last podcast. I'm not being like cryptic. It's been 2 weeks since I filmed my last podcast episode. And in those 2 weeks, I have been to New York City. I've been to Kleinfeld's. I've been to Miami. I have been to Vermont. And I've had work mornings where I had to be at a wedding for 6 a.m. that were 2 and 3 hours away. And so like I've lived so many lives, and this just kind of hit the back burner when it was too finicky to think about on those more, I don't want to say stressful days, because everything was very exciting and very fun, but it's been a whirlwind and my brain has needed a break. So this just kind of fell to the wayside while it wasn't knitting and it was more repair. So I've just got this really back onto my needles in the past week, and I'm just trying to power through and get this done because I have intentions to wear this in early November to the baby shower. So that's where we're at with the Darling cardigan. I'd like to, at the very least, set the intention of getting the button bands like picked up and cast on by the next podcast. I won't put too much pressure on myself to finish it, but I think that's a good benchmark to hit. And as of today, this one's been on my needles now for 64 days. So that's my Darling cardigan. Now for the quickest update, this is my Miles shirt jacket by Haley Smedley Ozetta. I'm knitting this out of Istax Plotu Lopi in the red-brown colorway on some 5-6 millimeter needles. It's a top-down kind of drop shoulder jacket style cardigan, and this update's going to be quick because I feel like I haven't touched this since I filmed last. In fact, this was like the first thing I remember just packing away, knowing it was not going to be schlepped around to all of my adventures. And so you could tell it's probably seen better days. It's all crumpled up. I literally just pulled it out of the bag for the first time since I put it in there. But where I'm at on this right now is that the first sleeve is ready for a cuff. So I'll actually probably just break the yarn here. One of the strands already did that for me since it is so easy to break. And I'll probably just pop these stitches on hold while I catch the other sleeve up to the same point. That way I can fully try this on and make sure that the sleeves are feeling like the right length before I knit the ribbing. I did try to overshoot the length of the sleeve because I want them to be super cozy. And I have to tell you that stepping outside this morning, it was cold. And all I could think was, why is my Miles shirt jacket not ready to wear yet? That is this thing's purpose. It's going to live by the door for chilly mornings, to take the dog out, to take the dog on walks. That's the plan for this cardigan. And we're in this season, so I need this to be done. This is definitely going to become top of mind over the next couple of weeks. So yeah, I'll probably get those stitches just on hold and get the sleeve picked up. Maybe not today, but in the next couple of days. So super quick update here. She's been on the needles for 37 days today. Like I said, I've been so many places over the past couple of weeks, and basically after I had filmed last, I was looking at this long weekend of traveling, and I knew I would be on trains and planes and maybe buses in there. Yeah, I was on a couple buses. So I wanted to make sure that I was gonna have a project that would be very easy to travel with and work on said trains and planes. And I really tried so hard to make my Camisole #7 by My Favorite Things Knitwear that project, and I got so close. So let me update you on where that's at, and I'll tell you, so I didn't get it to that full, like, perfect travel knitting state, and instead I wound up taking my little ribbed collar that I've been working on for my Stitches sweater. That was my travel knitting. I'm not even going to pull it out to show you because it's just a little panel of ribbing, but I figured that would be a good way to force myself to work on that, and it was really kind of nice to have. It's in my purse now, and it's going to live there as my just grab and go. I have a few minutes to put in some time on this until it's really long so I can actually make it into the collar of said Stitches sweater. So let me show you just how far I got on my Camisole #7 before I decided it was not going to be the perfect travel knit. Here she is. This is that iconic camisole worked in the broken rib stitch. I'm making mine out of Sanascarn Tin Lena in the burgundy colorway, and I'm working this up on 3mm needles. Now I'm getting frustrated because it's not done, and yet the weather to wear this is just fleeting. Although I think it will be cute under like a blazer or a leather jacket or something, so I'm not too worried about it, especially considering the color is like a very year-round good color to have. But basically, I have been so hung up on knitting the decrease details that make up the kind of like bust line of this tank top. And they've been frustrating the heck out of me. So I was like, okay, if I just get through that, then I'll be just knitting miles of broken rib stitch until I reach the hem of this cami, and then it's done. So like, let me power through and I'll get there before I wind up having to go on our trip. And it didn't happen. And what's most frustrating is I think I'm literally like a single round of increasing or decreasing, whatever it is, away from getting into the broken rib. But I was really powering through this. I mean, I got quite a bit done. And then I read in the pattern, it said something along the lines of like knit this amount of there's a 4-row sequence that makes up that detail that you see on the bust. And it said for my size to knit however many, but then it also had this caveat of, or as many as you need to be like, to look proportionate to your body. And I was like, what? There was something about that line that made me feel like there wasn't an end point. And I had been working so hard to try and get it done so that I could just broken rib on trips and trains and planes. And I had to just accept defeat. So I paused on this, knowing that when I return to it, I have to just knit that last kind of 4-round sequence sequence, and then try this on. I do think that the amount of detail that was written into the pattern seems fine for my size, so I can't imagine I'd have to keep going with that, but I don't want to have to rip back or be dissatisfied with any part of this very time-consuming camisole. I plan to love this and cherish this piece. So I'm going to take my lessons from the Darling cardigan and do it once, do it right. I will finish the amount that is stated for my size in the pattern, and then I will try it on and decide if I need to do more. And then once that's done, it will turn into a little bit more of a mindless knitting project. So that's kind of something to look forward to as well. As of today, this camisole has been on my needles for 72 days, which just feels like an absolute eternity considering the fact it is a camisole. But that's the thing, you know, you knit these little fingering weight projects and they look so beautiful. They're so worth all of the effort, and they take time. So I can appreciate that. If nothing else, I know I'll love wearing this next summer. I'm obsessed with the color. And then this was an interesting thing because I'm starting to feel like maybe I've done something wrong. I am still working on the first ball of yarn for this project. Meanwhile, I bought 3 to knit up this cami. As far as I can remember, did I buy 4? If I bought 4, then I'm on the second one right now. I can't exactly remember. All I know is that I'm looking at 2 brand new balls of yarn, and there's still quite a bit here, so I'm struggling to believe that I'm going to need all of that. And then I'm not really sure what to do with the leftovers, but I'm always shocked with these camis how little yarn you use. So they are great little stash busters, little odds and end users, or just if you're going to like a yarn festival, wink, wink, Rhinebeck, all of that weekend, and you want to snag just a couple balls of a fingering weight yarn, you can make so many beautiful camis with that. So if that's your thing, I think that's a great way to navigate a yarn festival. So that's where we're at with the camisole number 7. If I'm setting little goals for myself along the way, let's see. Let me get through that increase and we'll go from there. So those are all the whips that you've seen before, the one that you hadn't. And now I'd like to share with you the most exciting thing I've just ever made in my whole life, which is interesting too, because before knitting, I was a crocheter. After crocheting, I learned how to sew, and only then did I come into knitting. With crocheting, I followed with crocheting, I literally learned how to make a granny square first, and then I just made a billion of them and figured out how to sew them together for my best friend's baby blanket. After that, I kind of came away from crocheting for a little while. When I returned to it, I followed a video tutorial for my behemoth of a crochet cardigan, which included just enough kind of information about structure of a garment, and then like double crochets and bobble stitches, and I was off to the races after that. I never looked at a crochet pattern again. And I would just crochet and like make up my own sweaters and stuff. With sewing, I definitely just sewed random dresses and like gowns and stuff before I ever looked at a sewing pattern. And and then I came to knitting and could not for the life of me figure out how to get from point A to point B with knitting. It just was never as intuitive as those other things were for me, even though I had those things under my belt. So along the way, you've seen me really push myself to make modifications and to explore all of my little internal designer desires in the way that I could. And so it's always been in the form of just modification, 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 be that gauge, be that silly things like splitting a hem, adding sleeves, taking sleeves off. I mean, you name it, I've modified it. Then came little projects along the way. I knit a sweater for my puppy Osie, and that I just completely did by figuring out my gauge, taking measurements, getting it on her, and it's the best fitting sweater I've made her. But even still, I didn't feel 100% confident in the process. Then things like this little baby sweater where I got those stitch counts and then I just kind of went from there. That all has felt really good, but still never felt like I opened a door to design that I'm stuck on the other side of. Then I had this idea for my Christmas cardigan this year. This is my big Christmas project, which I'm just loving being this annual thing I do. I get really excited about these like monumental projects, and this is one that, even though it's not a dress or some like big project, it's probably the most intense thing I will have ever made. And it's funny that I have no pattern and I have no doubt in my mind I could just figure it out as I go. So for me to show you what I'm about to show you, this might seem like such a small, insignificant thing, but I have never felt more accomplished or proud of myself in a project literally ever before. I had a vision for a cardigan. I drew up my color work charts. I did them wrong and had to redo them, I think 5 times over now. I knit up my gauge swatch after the fact, and that's sitting beside me. I'm not going to show it to you now because it's going to give away the color work chart design, but basically the color work I imagined being like this big, and it was like this big, and it was just funny to me. So I've had so much trial and error. And then I know that I want this cardigan to have a saddle shoulder design because there's going to be color work motifs down the front of this otherwise V-neck cardigan. And there's not going to be anything on the back. And I felt like if I didn't have something going on the sleeves, it would just be a little bit like, why is there color work on the front of that? So I literally sat down and I drew out exactly what I wanted my saddle shoulder design to be, which was going to involve texture running from the shoulder all the way down the sleeve. I had a few things key elements I wanted. A was cables. I knew I wanted cables in there, but I didn't want just one cable coming down the sleeve. I wanted there to be texture that felt kind of nostalgic and felt Christmassy and traditional, but also something that had enough of a modern edge that it would be something you could maybe see somewhere like Cezanne, which was the last video I had done. So something that called upon the past and tradition and classic cable sweaters, but also brought a little bit of a modern edge. And I drew it out. I started trying to figure out how to chart it. I couldn't work that way, so I literally started just knitting a row, writing down what I did in the chart, knit the next row, write down what I did in the chart, rip it all out. That didn't work. All right, start again. This many stitches, that many stitches. This is the gauge, but this is how the gauge changes with cabling. I mean, I feel like I'm blabbering. I know I am, and I'm sorry if that's boring to you, but I just have to tell you that the little thing I'm about to show you took hours. And starting and stopping and ripping out and all of the in between, but I finally got it. And I've never been so proud of something before. So I'm now going to show you the design of the saddle shoulder for my Christmas cardigan, which I am designing. So excited. I probably should have steam blocked this before I sat down here today, but we'll use a little bit of our imagination. And I'll also have to provide some close-ups so you can actually see what's going on here. But this is the motif, the design, the saddle shoulder, the cables. I hope that with the description I just gave you, you could see the vision come to life. I've done my favorite little, what I call unicorn horn cables. I love cables that just twist in the same direction the whole way and are just made up. They're little 4-stitch cables. And I knew I wanted to incorporate some seed stitch since everything else in this cardigan is going to be very flat. I just really wanted to kind of romanticize the texture of the sleeves and the shoulders. But then I also knew I wanted these traveling cables and I didn't want to do diamonds. I wanted something that would be elongated and like reminiscent of Christmas pastries or something, like Italian cookies in the winter time. And I don't know about you, but I feel incredibly accomplished in what I'm looking at here. I was literally shocked when it was exactly what I drew. So this is going to be the saddle shoulder. Actually, this exact shape and size, this is what makes up the saddle shoulder itself, obviously when it's blocked. And then it's going to run its way down the arm as well. And I just think it's going to add enough visual interest to the rest of this cardigan without having to overcomplicate things or make it something it's not. I didn't want a textured cardigan. I wanted a basic cardigan that had these colorwork blocked motifs on it. And I just wanted something to richen up the rest of the otherwise basic cardigan. So yeah, this is the Wool of the Andes worsted in the colorway Oyster Heather. And I'm so excited to say that with this out of the way, I went ahead and figured out, I measured all of my sweaters, cardigans, jackets, wrote down the ranges of like how long I liked certain measurements to be. And from there, using my gauge, I've mapped out how many stitches I need where, again, in like kind of ranges was what I thought would be best to work with. And as of this morning, I have finished fixing the charts I had made, and I've started writing down the first instructions of the cardigan so that I can get started with this. And I got to tell you, if everything else falls to the wayside and I only work on this, I'm sorry. I'm so unbelievably excited. I also kind of had designed things from the bottom up and then decided like, nope, I really don't want to work a new design that way because I do want to be able to try it on and like attack problems as I go. So that was another hurdle in just figuring out how I was going to rework the charts. I've been using Stitch Fiddle, by the way, which I just today paid for a subscription for because prior to that, every time I made a mistake in my colorwork chart, I was literally like adding rows to just redraw things next to it and then delete. I mean, it was a mess. So I've unlocked some of the premium features, which if you're going to do your own design, pay for the month. Just pay for the month. Don't do what I did. It was not worth it. Hours have been wasted, but it all had to happen. So yes, a very little thing. I just think it looks like a little Italian cookie. I don't know how to explain it. I want it to have like jelly on the inside. I just really loved the long stretch of this kind of like DNA strand shape, but then with the seed stitch in the middle. And like I said, I've not referenced a single pattern. I've been so adamant about not doing that. I've literally committed myself to don't look at anything. Figure it out, write it down, and get it done. And I might even print out the chart that I made in order to work this stitch because it's beautiful and it's taken so long to make. And I'm just so stupid proud of it. And this is what I mean when I say you can knit the hard things. I'm so close to crying because this is something that a year ago, even I would have said there's no way I could figure out how this is made. I would not have been able to even read this knitting and like know what was happening, what would even go into making this. But this is where I can see that every sweater I've ever made, everything I've ever knit, every little skill I've picked up along the way is in this piece without having to go look at them. I just know how these things work now. I understand how to make cables travel. And I also know that the things that frustrate me with other patterns, I can now control. I can make sure that my cables are twisting the way that I want them to. I can always make sure that they're twisting away or in or mirrored or not. And I have all the control over that. And it's only from the experience I've now gained that I can make my silly little saddle shoulder cable. And I'm so pleased with it and I'm so proud of it. I think it's one of the prettiest things I've ever made. Even if it's not, it's mine. And it came from my brain and it came from my hands. And no one can explain to you how good that feels to bring something that you've been seeing in your head to life without compromise either. You want to see my silly drawing? This is my silly and terrible drawing. This was the best I could do to put what was in my head onto paper and then just start knitting things until it looked like this. And it's astonishing. It's exactly what I wanted it to be. Couldn't be more thrilled. So that means that the next time I see you, we're gonna have the first true update on the Christmas cardigan adventure, which I think is gonna be so fun because each week I'll be revealing to you another component of the design. And I'm going to be figuring out intarsia knitting. I'm going to be figuring out saddle shoulder constructions. I've only knit one sweater, top down saddle shoulder. So I'm just figuring it out as I go with the numbers I've written down and taking you guys along the ride with me. So I hope you're excited. I'm over the moon excited. So that's everything. Thank you for bearing with me as I wax poetic about my Christmas cardigan. It's just surreal to be finally accomplishing this goal I've had for so long, and what a perfect way to do it, like as a big exclamation point at the end of the year. With that, it's everything I had for you today. I would love to know who's going to Rhinebeck. What are your plans for that weekend? Are you going to be attending any of the other things going on? If you've been here for a little bit, you know it's not my favorite place to be. I have a couple videos about it. And so I ultimately decided that this year I just wouldn't reserve that weekend to like turn down work to go to Rhinebeck. And so that means I do have to work that weekend, but not every day. However, things are still kind of up in the air where I'm working that weekend. So I'm still figuring out exactly what my plans are. But I'd love to know who's going to be there, where, and when. And if you want a little bit more information to figure out if you're a Rhinebeck person or not, I would definitely recommend checking out one of my previous videos on the topic, because I will give you the full, raw, just off the cuff opinion on the Rhinebeck festivals. So yeah, check those out if you haven't seen them already. I hope you're working on a project that gets you very excited, that brings you a lot of joy. If this is your name on the screen here, I'm waiting to hear back from you for our giveaway. If I don't hear from you by the next podcast, I'll have to select a new winner. So if you see your name on the screen here, please be sure to email me down below. And with that, you guys, if you enjoyed this video, I would love it so much if you'd go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you subscribe, thank you for 17,000 of you being here. I'm having an emotional day. Thanks, guys. If you want to come join the party, just go ahead and hit that subscribe button and make sure that you ring the bell so that you're notified anytime I post a new video. However, you could usually expect a Saturday morning upload at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And with that, a big ol' thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.